All right, so first, thank you for letting me come in and video you and your kiddos and taking part in this. So, first, you watched the video.
Yes.
Give me your thought process when you walked through and looked through back.
So, as I was watching, took me a little while to get started. There was a lot of downtime on my kids' part and on my part. My kids seemed to be pretty engaged most of the lesson, even as I watched back through it. Even though I was a little worried as I was teaching the lesson, you never know if they're actually engaged or if they're faking it. But even as I was watching back through, my kids seemed to really be engaged until the downtime. I mean, wasn't the best lesson, wasn't the worst lesson.
Yeah.
I feel like it was like a subpar, normal Wednesday.
So, if you were to rate that 0 being the worst lesson,
Okay.
10 being the best lesson, where do you think you're going to fall in that range?
Probably like a 4.
Okay.
5, 4.5.
It's definitely some room for growth. Yeah.
Definitely.
Okay. What pleased you about lesson? You mentioned the student engagement looking back. What else was?
The conversations, even if there were side conversations,
Yeah.
they were still related to what I was talking about.
Right.
They weren't just off talking about Instagram or anything. They were actually talking about what we were doing.
Okay. What would you think it would take? So you said it was about a 4, 4.5, 5, using the half steps here. Math teachers, it's fine. What would it take to get this to a 10? Where do you think you can
I think
improve?
if I could have, if there wasn't so much downtime.
Okay.
I think if there's more instructional time, not even necessarily me being a direct instruction, maybe like started them with a warm up.
Yeah.
Got them ready instead of having to rein them in, just have them already, and then giving them like a cool down, like take it out the door. Like I want you to keep thinking about this until the bell rings. Like I want you to be on the page that I'm on the entire class, even if it's not direct instruction.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
It does. And I think that's definitely, when I was in there, I could see that the kids had kind of waltzed in and they were just chilling. And it could be, I know it was first period, early in the morning. They're just waking up like 30 minutes ago. And that can maybe help get them thinking and get ready for the school day ahead of them. So we talked about what that would look like. So what do you think, so you know the whole purpose of this is to identify an area that you would like to grow in and what we would like to change. So what would you like your goal to be for this? Where do you want to have that growth?
Full instructional time.
Okay.
I want to utilize the time I have completely instead of having so much downtime, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So I want to utilize my time, my instructional time wisely, because obviously I was not. Which I mean, like I said, not my best lesson.
Yeah, and that makes sense to have that. And that obviously doesn't have to look like direct instruction all the time.
Yeah.
It can just be engagement, whether that is, activating their learning at the beginning or doing that ticket at the door as a checkup at the end.
Having them check in with each other, see how each other's doing, peer review. Like, there were a lot of things I definitely could have done that I think would have.
Yeah. What do you think that would mean to you and to your students if we could get you to that goal? Like, what do you think that would mean to them?
I think that it would help them retain it better the next day. And moving forward, being able to, if I'm able to utilize the most out of my time, I think just being able to get them to focus on it for that long will help them retain it a little more than they normally would.
Yeah.
So when they come back in the next day and we're building on it, they're not going to be like, wait, what? I'm like, well, like the first 15 minutes of class, I talked about this. So I think it would help them because they're going to be with it longer.
Absolutely. And I think, so you've mentioned that that's what you were seeing. And it's kind of funny because that's what I was seeing when I was in observation with you. So with this, we've set the goal to use our full instructional time. And as I'm seeing your watch yourself interaction, I see we rated ourselves at a 3 for, very little wasted time. So even in your self-reflection, we can see, okay, there was some wasted time.
Yeah.
You were very open about wanting that to be your goal.
Yes.
And that matches up with exactly what I saw here. So if we look here, I made a very rough seating chart of, quickly sketching out what we got here. And I made note of instructional time versus non-instructional time, how we'll stopwatch going. And so the total time I was in there was about 45 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
And so from the time that I was in there, I started. So we had about a 50-second, bring them together. Hey, get your pencil out, get your paper, get this on the front. And then almost immediately went to a non-instructional 2 minutes downtime. Announcements are going. You take an attendance, some kids trickling in, things like that. But it continued on. And so your total instructional time was actually not as bad. It was 29:30, so 29 minutes and 30 seconds out of the 45-minute class period. So your downtime was actually just 15 minutes and 30 seconds. I guess it seems like a lot worse when we're going throughout the class.
Yeah.
But we can probably get, we're almost at the halfway mark with that. So I took our instruction, non-instructional time. So 65% of the time we were instruction,
Mm-hmm.
and 35% were non-instruction. So that is matching up pretty well with your self-assessments. And then, so I went to finding a real learning index. So I take your instruction time and compare it to your engagement.
Okay.
You mentioned earlier that you felt like your students were engaged even if they were little side conversations. You were actually dead on with that. I took every 10 minutes, I put a plus sign or a minus sign, quick look around the room, are we engaged? Whether that's interacting with you, working on the class notes, getting ahead in some of the class notes. I will say some of your kids were like, yeah, I got this, and just went running with it. So still engagement, still interaction there. So I did that for every 10 minutes. So I had 4 marks for every student. And that's 72 marks total. And out of those 72 marks, 62 of them were positive, which means for 86% of the time, your students were engaged to some degree capacity, whether that was working on the notes during instruction or once you released them to do their life games or their activity, their one-on-one time, they were doing something to some capacity.
Yeah.
So that was awesome. When you are having that indirect instruction, they are engaged with you.
Yeah.
So our real learning index takes that and brings it into our instruction. So if we were to break this down into 3 parts, 35% of the time, we were off task. Okay. 56%, you were on task and your students were fully engaged, and we were rolling.
Good.
And then 9% of the time you were up there teaching, kids were off task. So it's actually looking pretty good, and that's going really well with what your own goal was of increasing that instructional time. Was take that 35% down, to a little bit less of that.
Yeah, just a little bit.
And working through that. So let's actually set our goal. So our goal is to use our instructional time wisely, to increase our instructional time, which would, because your engagement is already so high, that would then increase your RLI score, your real learning index of like when they're really engaged in learning.
Okay.
So let's actually set this goal. How do we want to move? So you are currently at a 56% RLI score. What would we like to increase to?
I mean, ideally, like 90%.
Okay. Yes, I can see the A.
So, I mean, but yeah, like an A, 90%.
Let's try and move. So a long term.
Yeah, long term.
We would like our RLI to be 90%. So let's talk short term because obviously that's going to take some time. With us being in
Yes.
March, we may not actually hit that goal.
Short term,
By
I feel
May-
like if I can get 70%
Let's get
short
to
term.
it. Yeah. Let's get to so by the end of this coaching session, let's see if we can take that first period of instructional time and their engagement combined, and let's bring that up to an RLI score of,
Let's make it 75.
yeah, I think that is definitely doable and
Especially-
reasonable.
Yeah.
With your students already high engagement, regardless of when we are as a collective class direct instruction or not.
Mhm.
I think including that instruction, we can get to that score pretty easily. So how would you like to measure this? What would you mentioned a warm up or a ticket out the door to activate. So we can start with that, incorporating warm ups,
Yeah, I want
ticket out the
something.
door.
Yeah, I want something that as soon as they get in, they're like, all right, let's get into this mode. Let's
Mhm.
start thinking.
Yes.
So I really think a warm up is going to be the best way to activate them and get them.
Yeah.
And take it out the door. That way, I keep them until the end,
Mm-hmm.
and they don't just completely shut down, forget everything I taught them.
Right. And we could even do, if you give a ticket out the door, do a think, pair, share about that as a warm up once they come in. You can look at your ticket out the door from yesterday. Hey, was I connecting with this? As almost a self reflection.
Oh, such a good idea. I like that.
So then they can reflect on, hey, you've taken time to look at this. Let's look at it again. Ooh, I might not have
Yeah,
understood it like I thought I did.
I like that. That's
So let's start with that. Let's start with some warm up, some ticket out the doors, different activating strategies to help get this RLI score up to a 75%, getting that engagement, that instructional time, even if it's not just you at the board,
Yeah.
just keeping them actively learning.
Yes.
Sweet. So we've got our goal, we've got our steps, we've got how we're going to do it. Now, let's put it in place.
Okay,
Sweet.
let's go.